All right, squad. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to add Tanstack Query to our Rails app running Inertia. I know it's a mouthful, but I'll show you what we're doing. So we have our Inertia entry point here, which we are going to wrap with the query client provider. And then inside of our modal, where we need some data, we're going to be running the use query here, and we're going to use the Rails request.js to get this data back so that we can then render our fields in our modal. All right, let's jump in. Okay, so that's in. We just run vite dev. All right, got the CDN. We're not running ESLint right now. Let's move on to the quick start. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to wrap our app in the query provider and also set up the query client. We are using Inertia here. So what we can do is if we jump into app JavaScript Inertia, here we go, Inertia.js, you can see this is where we are setting up the Inertia app. And you can see here down the bottom, this is where we're creating the root element and we're creating the element here and we're getting the app out from there. What we need to do is we need to now wrap this app. So let's have a look at how we can actually achieve that. All right, so what it looks like is we need to wrap this guy here. So we need to turn that into an element. So we need to grab the Tanstack tools here. So we're going to grab these and we're going to pop them there. So yep, those are all good. We're going to create our query client here. This is where we can pass in our options if we need to. Then we need to do our app here. So we actually probably don't need these use query, use notation, use query client just yet. That's later. So we just really need this one. So what we need to do here is we need to create this component down here. So if we've got the element, we need to now create a new version of this app with including the wrapper. I'm going to name this one const wrapped app, and it's going to be equal to here. And then we're going to do query client provider, and we're going to do query client equals query client like that. And then we're going to go query client. Why is this not auto-completing? Because probably something wrong with doesn't like this. Client and children. You could probably also do it another way, but this is throwing because it's not a TSX file. So let's just rename this and let's hope that this all works. If I rename that to TSX, now we should see what's going on here. Let's just close off Vite and just rerun it and just make sure everything's still working. This page reload. There's an error. What is the error? The error is entry points is not working. That's annoying because is it looking for a TS? Maybe we have to update some logic. I wonder if we have to use old school like create element stuff. Let's go const wrapped app equals create element. And then we want to use the query client provider. And then we want to pass in, this is the props. So I imagine it looks like this, like that. But then how? So it goes type props and then children. Now I haven't written this like this before. Do we then pass in this guy like that? And then we render the wrapped app. And let's have a look. Does that actually work? Okay, so I think I've done a little bit different here. So I think the way that this usually looks is something like this. It's why we don't use this, is why JSX is so much better. But something like that, I think, is the boys. Let's see. What are we getting? Can't read properties with undefined reading mount. Okay, so we got a Tanstack problem, which is interesting. What is that saying? Client.mount. So it's something wrong with the client. Like, I mean, we are getting this error here. Query client does not exist. So what do we have here? Client, query, client. Interesting. I wonder how we pass it through when doing stuff like this. So it looks like it's just client and children. So I wonder if you just pass straight through. No, that's not working. Is it client? That looks like it. Please work. There we go. All right, so we wrapped. So that firstly is how we wrap a component in Inertia, right? So it's because it's a TS file here and is looking for the TS file. We can't use TSX, so we can't use JSX in the thing. So it's annoying. So we got to use this like weird old school kind of functional React, which no one wants to write. But so what we're doing here is we're creating a new element with the query client provider, passing in props, and then we're passing in children. And then from there, we're using that as our main app. So now we should have access to the Tanstack stuff, which is great. So if we jump into, I mean, probably the simplest is if we just jump into this page. So we've got inside here, we've got our JavaScript, and then we've got our front end, and we have our V2, and we have pages here. And if we go and have a look, we can probably pull out from Tanstack, we can grab the use query client, right? So let's just try grab that just quickly. Let's use this hook. and see what happens. Let's see if we actually get it. So we're just checking our context here. So we're going to say query client equals use query client. I'm just going to console log it here. All right, let's see what happens. Okay, we've got this little dude, which is not that fun. So yeah, just wrap that in an object just to get it out. So that is the query client, so it's got a weird name. But what we can now do is we can go query client dot, and then we can see all these functions here. So we can say, maybe we should just say get default options. Let's console log that and see if we're getting it. And all I'm trying to check here is just making sure that our query client is running. So there's nothing in the default options because we actually haven't passed any in. All right, so we have actually wrapped that successfully and we have the context. So now we can keep moving forward. All right, so let's just quickly have a talk about why I'm doing this. So because we're using Inertia, what you can do is you can inject the page props, right? So that's the key thing with Inertia. So in our controllers, V2, and then we go to our ideas controller, scroll up here to index. You can see we have the ideas here as the normal variable. And then I've just got a flag here at the moment. So alpha features, I'm going to render Inertia. Otherwise, I'm just rendering the old one. Now with Inertia, you can see we're rendering this page out, which is this list page, which is the component. And then we've got our props and we're passing in ideas, and I'm deferring the props so that the page can load as fast as possible. And then I go and fetch those ideas after Inertia will send the request. So very cool. But the problem arises when we want to use modals. So this is one weakness that I would say compared to Rails so far, is that in Rails we'll render a new route and we have access to the params we need. So if you have a look here, we've got the idea and the channels, right? But with the weakness, they also come strings. So usually when we hit this, we're going to render a new, we're going to get those params. But with Inertia, you would have to supply them in at the index route. Now that can be okay, but what happens is if you have special things, like when we do a hover like this, you don't want to apply all these extra data points that you may not use, especially when we hit this new idea, right? So what we've got here is we're going to have categories. So all the organizations categories and also all the organization channels. I don't want to load all of those in case the user never even hits the new button, right? We're just kind of probably prematurely optimizing, but I think performance is key. And that's one of the main reasons why we've moved to Inertia. But this is also something. So when you click on this and you swaps team, we need to reload the channels here as well as the categories. Now, I can't see a very easy way to do that. Like you could do a partial fetch from Inertia to redo the page, but then have to manage the state. It just feels like it's not right. It doesn't feel like that's the way you want to do. You don't really want the index page to have to provide props to these modals, because as you introduce modals, and usually that's what happens over time, you now have all these props for these random modals you may never use. So I don't like that. So I think what we could do here is we can use Tanstack Query, and Tanstack's very good at being able to say, let's fetch these, and when the props change, we can go and actually go and grab the new data from the API basically. All right, so let's have a look at the first component that actually needs this. So this is inside of our front end, inside of our components, and let's start just jumping into the modal and go into the new idea modal, right? So this is the guy that needs to actually have access. So we're going to use the use query. I'm going to just do this for this kind of demo, but I would extract this logic into another place eventually, just so that you can always fetch from wherever you need to. But let's go. So in the list page, I've added this Tanstack import. So let's grab this and let's chuck it in here. So I like to put it here above. Why is that? There we go. So we're gonna now do use query. Okay, so we're going to use that import here. Probably don't need a multi-line. Right, so we're going to grab that, and then we're going to put it after this here, and we're going to go, I'm going to have to remember how this all works because I haven't used use query in a while. So the options, go here, and then we need, I think it's the data that comes out. Yep, data. And we need to set this up. So if we look at the docs, probably the best way to do this. So here's the query, right? So let's just do it how they do it. So we're gonna go use query, query key. So this is gonna be let's go channels, yeah? Right, and then here's the query function. And this is what I like about Tanstack here. You can provide whatever you want, this function. So what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna just open this up like this. And from here, so it can literally be any function. So you could even just go, you could return an array here. And then if we go console.log, I wonder if it has to be a promise though. If we just go query.data, let's see what happens. Let's see if it actually worked. It might not. Oh no, there we go. So you can see I've just provided literally a return of an array, and it just works. But what we're gonna do here, because we wanna interact with Rails, so we have in here, we have the Rails request library. So we just look for request, I believe, Rails request.js, that's the one, .js. So we wanna grab this here, and we're gonna use the get request, right? So we can grab that, and now what we're gonna say is we're gonna get from there. So if you have a look at the put here, we need to pass the route and then any of the params that we need to, and then also the response kind. So I might just grab all of that. And then we've got something really cool here as well. So inside of this, we're using a library that takes our Rails routes and turns them into method calls so we can actually get them. So if we go import, I think it's gonna be v2 channels path. There we go. So we got this routes lib file. So if we jump in here, it generates all the routes for us, right? So every route in our app gets generated as you can see here. There's the path, and then it creates a little function with all the requirements. So now we have typed routes that we can access inside of Rails, which is really cool. So if we say now inside of here, we have our route. So I might even just open this here and then just move this inside. I'll just paste that there just so I don't forget it. Chuck that there. And then we're going to just say return that and here. And then what we're going to say is this is going to be const route is equal to v2 channels path. Now you can see we've got options in here, and let's have a think. So we want to basically pass through the format. So we're going to go format, and what do we have here? Does it tell us a string? I think it's just JSON that we want. And then we also want to pass through the parameter. So depending on the organization, we need to fetch. So every organization has their own channel. So we only want to return channels for a specific organization. So let's have a look at our route probably as well. It's probably a good idea. So if we go into the channels controller, we've got channels, the index here, and then we can pass through the organization ID, right? So that's what we want to do. Let's see if we can do that. It'll be data.organization ID, right? That's what's going to be, and that's coming from our form. We probably also need to pass this in here to the query key because we want to fetch channels. And then whenever this query key changes, Tanstack will re-trigger this query. So we've got the route, right? And you know what? I'm getting the wrong thing here. That needs to come into here, and it's not body. So we need to say, is it query? Yeah, right. So then what we're going to do is we're going to pass into the query string that we don't need a body. It's not a put. And then we're going to get, and let us see what happens. Hopefully something. There we go. Got a fetch response. Organization's undefined. Okay, so it hasn't been set, but that's fine. It's probably because the form hasn't been set. If I change this, we've got organization 15, we've got a fetch response, and here we go. All right, so we're making the response. There's the response body, it's a stream. So we need to read out the JSON now to be able to pass that through to Tanstack. So this is basically where you would have your API kind of things happening. And Tanstack's not really concerned with that. It's just gonna call that function. So what we wanna do here is if we have a look at how this comes back, I don't think we use it usually. A lot of the time it's just making a call and not actually caring about the result. I'll find one that does. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is not in the list in this guy. So we're not going to return here. We're going to call this response equals, and then we're going to go here, and we also want to await that. And then this needs to be async. All right, so it's an async request. We're awaiting the get here, and then we're going to say const here. We're going to return the JSON, right? And this I think needs to be like that. Let's see how that's looking. New idea. And let's change this. It's crashing, undefined. Undefined, expected a JSON response. Okay, so now that's going to come from our controller, because I think at the moment we only return, let's see what we return. Index doesn't have a response for a JSON. So let's add that. So to do that, we're going to do a respond to block here. And then we're going to say respond to do format. Then we're going to go format.json, and we're going to do, I think this is just a format.html, and we're going to say render. And what are we rendering? We're rendering, I think it's v2 channels / index, but let's just double check we haven't broken it. So that's kind of it. Let's just, I think it's because we're just rendering, hasn't refreshed the style sheet. There we go. All right, so that still looks like it's working. And then here we're gonna go for format.json. We're gonna look at, where can we go? I wonder if we can still render index. Let's just see if that works. I don't know if we have an index file for JSON, which will look for the JBuilder file. So let's just make sure we have that. So if we go into app, views, controllers, v2 channels, we don't have an index.json.jbuilder. So if we just go index.json.jbuilder, that will be the one. Let's just see if we have any more that we can just quickly copy. this guy, right? So that if we go into our index here, we're gonna go create a new partial, which will be channel.json.jboy. Right, chuck that there. Gonna have channel. We don't need the URL right now. I'm just gonna do ID. We're gonna do title, updated app. Let's see what other parameters we have quickly. Channels, what do we want to expose? So we need the organization ID. So we don't need any of these. Need organization ID because we're going to filter on that. Title, create that updated slug is default, probably useful. Content, so we've got platform ID, content type, and platform username, and then data. All right, so let's just go bang them in. All right, so that's the channel. And then the index is going to be the array of those things. All right, so the index looks like, if we're in the channels, we go here, we're gonna go JSON array, and it's gonna be channels. Partial is channels/channel, and as channel. You can do it in a few different ways. There's that way, there's a whole bunch of different ways. So you choose your poison. I like to sometimes actually just pass the params in, but for now, let's see if this works. So let's quickly have a look at this route and just make sure it actually works before we go too far. So I think it's just channels.json, and have a look if it actually runs. Missing partial channels. Okay, so we probably have to just append the v2 there, and then we should have it. Undefined method user ID. Cool, that's fine. Let's just probably left that in. Go. There we go. All right, pretty print that. Boom, there's our channel. So we got our little JSON endpoint working. So now, hopefully, if we go into ideas, we should actually be able to get that data out. Let's have a look. So open that up. Change this guy, change this guy. It's still getting undefined. We are getting our call here though. So what's the 304? Well, that's an unchanged, right? So something's working, but for some reason, I haven't pulled out the data properly. It's probably gonna be one of those things everyone's yelling at this screen. Let's have a look. And one thing that I've also just changed, I've just changed this control. You don't actually need this respond to if they're exactly the same, right? They both render index. Rails is smart enough to figure that out. We don't actually need that in there. So what we need to do is have a look at what's going on here. So I'm gonna pull this out, and I'm gonna go console.log. Let me just go here and just go JSON equals, and just see what's going on. It's saying undefined, right? So if we change this, undefined. So why are we getting undefined? It's also you know what, it's not retrying, but I think it's got a default setting. So every time you view the screen, I think it retries the request. Anyway, we're getting our JSON, right? So now we just have to figure out what's going on here. Let's go and just see what is happening. Change this out. All right, undefined. Oh, you know, I was just about to think that this wasn't on. I was about to smack myself in the face. Here we go. So why we're not getting the actual response out of here. I can't actually see any console logs. Why is that? See? Okay, so it's not a function call, it's just a .json, right? So if we do that, we should be able to now get that. So these little gotchas, eh? All right, let's see. We're still getting undefined. Query dot, there we go. So we're getting JSON there, and it's an array. Okay, great. So it's just .json for Rails. That's a gotcha. Go there. All right. So query data cannot be undefined. That's fine. Let's go restart and have a look. We're going to have a try catch, I reckon, around that block. But this is why you'd extract this kind of logic into its own method, just like API call. And then you can don't have to always do a try catch and all that. So if we change there, what are we getting now? There we go. There we go. We've got our data. Boom, Entity clips. Now if I change that, it'll rerun. So it instantly reset it to nothing. There's the route, and here's the 4 channels. We're on. So we can actually get this JSON out. So we can go query.data, and can see it can be undefined. So we have to be very careful there. But now we have access to that JSON. So we can now go in, because we're going to build out a similar little thing to this here for the channels. So when you change this organization, we can set the channels automatically, and away we go. So I just wanted to show you how to do that, because this is something that couldn't find really easy ways or easy documentation on how to do it, or even why to do it. So this is our use case, right? So we're presenting this little modal, and we want to make sure that we can get the data for it when it needs it, not just any time. So it's in a dialogue from Shad or Radix, I should say. So yeah, until next time, catch you later.